What is your main takeaway on this story right now? What would the FBI be looking at right now?
Good morning, ma'am. I think the priority one are these backpacks and these pieces of evidence that we've seen in that video. Likely the FBI's Phoenix division is in contact with big box stores and retailers in that area and with their corporate security offices to see exactly who may have purchased these types of items in the past several weeks, and particularly of interest if they purchased 2 or 3 things together, if they purchased a ski mask together, if they purchased a backpack together. That's going to help investigators even narrow it down.
What if everything you thought you knew about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance was only the surface? What if the real story didn't begin the night she vanished from her Catalina Foothills home, but inside a courtroom where her family has just broken their silence? Today, cameras weren't focused on a masked intruder. They were focused on faces, tight jaws, controlled breathing, eyes that looked calm, maybe too calm. And when Savannah Guthrie stepped forward, polished, poised, media trained, something shifted. Was it grief or was it strategy? Let's rewind. An 84-year-old matriarch disappears from one of the most secure neighborhoods in Tucson. Security cameras removed, blood found near the doorway, no signs of forced entry, an Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, a suspect described as comfortable at 2 a.m. inside someone else's home. And now, courtroom. Whispers, sealed documents, motions filed under urgency, anonymous sources claiming the circle around the family is tighter than it appears. So the question isn't just who took Nancy Guthrie. The question is why every new detail feels like it's pointing somewhere no one wants to look. Stay with me, because this story just escalated.
Are you actively investigating the son-in-law in this case? There were reports earlier this week and you refuted that. You said you haven't eliminated everybody. Have you eliminated him or come close to it, or are you actively looking at him?
We're actively looking at everybody we come across in this case. Everybody. We would be irresponsible if we didn't talk to everybody. The Uber driver, the gardener, the pool person, whoever. Everybody is so cliche, but everybody's still a suspect in our eyes. That's just how we look at things and think as cops. Does that mean we have a prime suspect? No, and the family's been very cooperative. They've done everything we've asked of them, and we want that relationship to continue. And sometimes people can be mean out there, and that can really harm us and harm our efforts.
The courtroom didn't feel like a place for grief. It felt like a stage, cameras lining the back wall, reporters whispering, legal teams shuffling papers like choreography, and at the center of it all, the Guthrie family. Annie Guthrie held a tissue, but never used it. Cameron Guthrie stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. And Savannah Guthrie, the media darling, stood composed in a tailored navy suit that signaled control, perhaps too much control. Because here is what made today different. It was not just a routine status hearing. It marked the first time sealed investigative motions were acknowledged publicly. And when Judge Halpern referenced an ongoing forensic expansion into peripheral associations, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Peripheral associations, that is legal language, but translated, it means the circle just grew larger. And that is where the narrative becomes uncomfortable. Because until now, the official account has remained simple. A masked intruder, an Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, security cameras removed, blood at the entrance, unknown DNA, no signs of forced entry. But today, an anonymous source within the Pima County Sheriff's Department shared information that changes the temperature of this case entirely. Quote, "This was not random surveillance. Whoever carried this out knew routines that were not public."
Nancy Guthrie was at her home in the privacy and security of her own home. That's the lowest risk environment she could possibly be in, especially a home like this, set back from the road and having a good perimeter around it. So that means that to invade that privacy and security, that's the highest risk for an offender. So this is a very high risk crime on a low risk victim. which means that the motivation must have been greater than the risk that was taken by this offender. And so motivations are typically money. If that's the case, then it's a kidnapping. If they ask for a ransom, then that would qualify as a kidnapping. Otherwise, it would be an abduction. And other motives could be revenge, some kind of personal ideology, or for sex crimes. And yes, even in cases of a victim of this age, there are people who commit sex crimes. So we don't know what the motive is, but we do know that it was very, very high in motivation because they overcame such a high risk. The next thing is the fact that they removed her from the home.
New routines that weren't public. Let that sink in. Nancy Guthrie was not a public figure in her private life. She wasn't posting schedules online. She wasn't live streaming grocery runs. So how would someone know when she was alone? When the cameras were active. Which angle to disable first? That isn't guesswork. That's learned behavior. And this is where the situation becomes more concerning. 3 weeks before the abduction, neighbors reported a dark SUV idling near the corner of Hawthorne and Bell Ridge. No license plates visible on camera. No traffic violations. Just sitting there. Twice. And then gone. Coincidence? Possibly. But the FBI quietly requested surveillance footage from January 11th, a date that has not been publicly explained. Why that date? Why not the night before the disappearance? Why not the day of? Investigators do not rewind 3 weeks unless they believe someone was watching, studying, mapping, and mapping requires information. Now consider the Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, exclusive to Walmart. According to retail insiders, and yes, we confirm this, bulk purchases of that specific model spiked in the Tucson region in late January. Bulk purchases. Who buys tactical-style backpacks in bulk? Camping organizations, perhaps, or someone preparing. And then there is the issue few want to address directly. Tommaso Cayenne, the son-in-law. Publicly cleared? No. Officially charged? Also no. Cooperative, according to Sheriff Nanos, yes. But cooperation is not the same as elimination. Nanos stated, everyone remains under review until resolution. Everyone. And when reporters asked about extended social proximity, he did not answer directly. He redirected, adding, that's not guilt, but it's not comfort either. Shortly after, details emerged about a sealed affidavit filed under an urgent protective order. Heavily redacted, but with one phrase that slipped through and immediately raised questions.
I hope they get the suspect, because I'm not it. They better do their job and find the suspect that did it so they can clear my name, and I'm done. Look at what I'm putting my family through.
You're on national news now.
Not just them, even my parents in Tucson. Right. Yeah.
Secondary access familiarity. That phrase matters. Secondary access does not mean a primary resident, not a homeowner, not immediate family. It means someone who has been there before but does not live there. Someone who has visited often enough to know where the Google Nest doorbell is mounted. Someone who knows Nancy prefers the side hallway light on after 10 p.m. Someone who understands the garage sensor delay. That is not a random criminal. That is a familiar presence. And here is what was largely overlooked online. While attention focused heavily on Tommaso Cayenne, the more relevant question may have been sitting quietly in the background. Who else had comfortable access? Who else moved in and out of that orbit without drawing attention? Because comfort at a crime scene is not confidence, it is familiarity. And familiarity does not develop overnight. This was not chaos, it was coordination. And the planning may have started well before February 1st. And that is where the situation escalates. 48 hours after the courtroom hearing, a document briefly appeared online and then disappeared. Screenshots were captured, archived, and circulated in encrypted group chats before moderators removed them. The document was described as an internal FBI memo, stamped Preliminary Behavioral Assessment. Now, to be clear, it was labeled unverified and could have been planted, but the language is what raised concern. It described the suspect as exhibiting non-urgent environmental navigation, consistent with prior spatial exposure. In plain terms, the individual did not move like a stranger. They moved like someone who had been there before. The memo also referenced informal social familiarity, clusters, plural, indicating investigators were not focused on a single household. They were mapping relationships, friends, colleagues, creative partners, frequent visitors, anyone who had entered the Guthrie residence within the past year. Then came a separate development involving financial activity. According to a source claiming access to records tied to individuals in Nancy Guthrie's outer circle, there were multiple cash withdrawals under $9,000 in the weeks before the disappearance. Withdrawals structured below reporting thresholds. That is not automatically illegal, but it is a pattern financial investigators pay close attention to. At the same time, while the family spoke publicly about unity and trust, social media began resurfacing old images. Holiday gatherings, backyard events, fundraisers at St. Philip's in the Hills Church. In more than one photo, a recurring figure appears just outside the center of the frame. Not family, but close, present, comfortable. Online users began analyzing posture, tattoos, body language, and one phrase began trending again, comfortable at 2 a.m. Because according to investigators, the suspect was not frantic or rushing. They adjusted a plant to block a camera with the calm of someone rearranging furniture. That level of composure suggests confidence, and confidence suggests familiarity. Meanwhile, within Pima County, rumors began circulating that investigators were quietly requesting voluntary DNA samples from extended associates, not warrants, not arrests, but informal requests, which signals direction without disclosure. Another detail soon followed. A Culver's parking lot camera captured a gray SUV circling twice the night before Nancy Guthrie vanished. The vehicle was registered to an individual who, according to property records, had attended at least 3 gatherings at the Guthrie residence over the past 2 years. Coincidence remains possible, but in complex investigations, patterns matter. And if this was coordinated, then the activity did not begin at 2 a.m. It began much earlier. Now the silence has grown louder. According to 2 courthouse sources speaking under strict anonymity, a sealed motion was filed requesting expanded digital Geo-fence data covering a 3-week period before the disappearance. Not 3 hours, 3 weeks. That indicates pattern analysis, not reactive policing. Additionally, financial forensic subpoenas were issued outward, not toward the Guthrie household, but toward individuals described in filings as non-resident recurring affiliates. Again, not family, but orbiting. Finally, a source close to the investigation claims analysts identified repeated late-night cellular pings near Catalina foothills, tied to a prepaid device purchased with cash. Activated January 9th, deactivated February 2nd, and then gone. However, digital records rarely disappear completely. And this is where the narrative shifts from crime to strategy. There has been no ransom demand, no manifesto, no public claim, no chaotic escape trail. Only precision, control, and silence. That suggests intent. Savannah Guthrie's courtroom statement, "We trust the investigation," was brief and measured, but analysts online scrutinized body language frame by frame. Sheriff Nanos added further intrigue when asked whether the suspect demonstrated intimate environmental knowledge. He paused and responded that investigators were exploring all proximity-based vectors. That language does not describe a random intruder. It describes relationship mapping. And that leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. If the suspect was not immediate family, if DNA does not match household members, and if investigators are widening the scope, then the most critical position in this case may not be at the center, but just outside it. Close enough to observe, far enough to avoid immediate suspicion, comfortable enough to stand at a front door at 2 a.m. without hesitation. And if that individual is following developments now, they may understand something the public does not. Because when law enforcement grows quiet, it often signals progress. This case does not appear to be collapsing suddenly. It is unraveling gradually, pattern by pattern, motion by sealed motion. And when that unraveling reaches its core, it will not arrive quietly. It will be definitive. The question now is whether the most significant development is still ahead or whether it has already occurred without being fully recognized.